Oui. Petite présentation. Je me mets là. Je ne fais pas un CV très long, ok?
Oui. Je tiens ça dans la main dans ce cas-là.
Tu peux mettre ici aussi, non? Efendim, hoş geldiniz. İstanbul Araştırmaları Enstitüsü olarak İstanbul Konferansları dizisinin bugünkü konuğu, daha önce bu mekanda kendisini dinlemiş olduğumuz Londra Üniversitesi'nden Profesör Doktor Doris Behrens-Abouseif. Kendisi daha önce Münih Üniversitesi'nde öğretim üyesiydi. 2000 yılından bu yana Londra Üniversitesi'nde SOAS'ta eğitim ve araştırma faaliyetlerini devam ettiriyor. Pek çok yayına imza atmış, pek çok sergi faaliyetine katılmış. Özellikle Memlûk dönemi mimarisi ve küçük sanatları konusunda herhalde dünyada en önde gelen isimlerden birisi. Bugünkü konuşması şu anda üzerinde çalıştığı ve bir kitap hazırlığı, yakında kitap olarak basılacak bir araştırma. Memlûk hükümdarlarının başka hükümdarlara yolladıkları diplomatik hediyeler ve göreceğimiz gibi bu hediyeler çok ilginç. Yollanılan hükümdarın dinine ve statüsüne göre özellikleri değişebiliyor. Şu anda da İstanbul'da Deniz Müzesi'nde ve Askeri Müze'de bize yollanmış olması muhtemel hediyeler üzerinde çalışmalarını sürdürüyor. Kendisine çok teşekkür ediyorum huzurlarınızda ve konuşmanın sonunda soru cevap faslında yine görüşmek üzere. S'il vous plaît.
Thank you very much. I also thank Özalp and Bahabe for having invited me to give this talk here. It's a great pleasure for me to be here and with the wonderful colleagues of mine, and it's quite an enjoyable experience for me to be in this Istanbul Institute to give this talk. A crossroad of embassies. This is how Memlûk Cairo has been described recently in the title of a conference that was dedicated to Memlûk diplomacy. Indeed, on the eve of the Ottoman conquest in 1517, Cairo was the largest city of the world at that time, at least outside China. Its expansion and prosperity were based on its geographic situation that allowed it to control the lucrative spice trade between the Far East and the Mediterranean. Its position in history, following the fall of Baghdad in 1258, made Memlûk Cairo the seat of the Second Abbasid Caliphate and in control of the holy cities of Mecca and Medina. Geographic privilege also allowed the Memlûk sultans to control the holy places of Christianity. This position and the leverage it gave to the Memlûk required a very important and expanded diplomatic network to consolidate it. There was also the issue of legitimacy, for which the Memlûk needed an important network of a diplomatic network. The Memlûks had earned the legitimacy to rule after they have their triumphs against the Mongols and the Crusaders in the 13th century, which they then continued or later on, but with religious patronage of great intensity. However, if the Memlûk earned their legitimacy within their territory and in a great part of the world, but it was not everywhere. The legitimacy of the Memlûk Sultan was not uncontested. Their Muslim rivals, the Ilkhanids, Timurids, and Ottomans, have described the Memlûks as slaves because of the recruiting system based on the purchase of young boys of non-Muslim origin and without a dynastic succession. According in the rivals' eyes, these slaves or former slaves were not entitled to be the guardians of the holy places of Islam. To defy such challenges, the Memlûks cultivated a pronouncedly pious and glorious image of themselves to be conveyed to the world. Diplomacy was a major vehicle to transmit this image. The reception of ambassadors with exchange of gifts was embedded in the elaborate ceremonial culture that the Mamluks proudly cultivated, perpetuating the legacy of ancient cultures, mainly the Sasanian, but also the Greek and Byzantine. These traditions are documented in the Islamic literature of the Mirror of Prince genre, which deals with kingship. Also, Mamluk literature on kingship, which draws largely on ancient pre-Islamic traditions, discusses the skills and etiquette of diplomacy, the duty of the monarch to display pomp in diplomatic audiences, to host foreign ambassadors with largesse and dignity, to guarantee the safe passage, and to offer presents to their diplomatic partners. Gifts represented the status of the giver, along with the written and oral message which embassies were supposed to convey. Gifts were the third form of diplomatic message. The Memlûk Sultans were well aware of the significance of gifts in diplomacy, not only to promote the image of power and self-representation, but also to serve immediate strategic interest. Sultan al-Nasir Muhammad, who ruled in the early first half of the 14th century and was one of the most important Mamluk sultans, emphasized the significance of diplomatic gifts when one of his bureaucrats criticized the huge amount of money spent on gifts to be sent to the Mongol ruler Abu Sa'id in Tabriz. And he said, well, listen, if you, Fakhreddin, you wouldn't speak like that if you knew what I know. This budget I'm spending on diplomatic gifts is very little compared to my pastime budget, but it can spare me so much military, strategic, and political costs of that are of much more considerable value. Some diplomatic gifts were not quite voluntary, but represented rather a suzerain-vassal relationship. That's a kind of tribute. But the words used in the text, they use the word hediye, which means present, although sometimes taqdima is used, but the same term is used for gifts and for tribute-like gifts. Among these were the gifts from the kings of Nubia, Yemen, the Turkmen principalities, and Cyprus and Little Armenia, that is Cilicia, after the conquest in the 14th and 15th century, respectively. When the Rasulid Sultan of Yemen tried to stop sending gifts to the Mamluk court in the early 14th century, Sultan al-Nasir Muhammad threatened with a military expedition against him. Usually, the vassals' gifts were reciprocated with robes of honor, called khila, horses with ceremonial trappings, weapons and ceremonial textiles of the Dar-e-Tiraz, which was the royal manufacture that produced ceremonial gowns embroidered with inscriptions, honorific inscriptions with titles. Robes of honor, or khila, were given by Mamluk sultans to vassals and rulers of subordinate status, such as the Turkmen rulers. It symbolized an investiture from a higher to a lower ranking person. But the Mamluk sultans themselves never received khila, and although all diplomatic gifts included textile and garments and clothes from all countries of the world, but they were not called khila. Khila, as a robe of honor, had a very specific meaning. And when it happened once or twice that a khila was sent as a diplomatic gift or a robe of honor, it was considered, and it was meant to be, a serious offense. Gifts were registered in state archives that were kept for centuries, recording the monetary value and in dinars of the gift packages received as well as those that were sent. The monetary value must have served as a kind of yardstick to measure the value of the gifts to be reciprocated and how the partner has been treating the Mamluk sultans. It's a way of, it's a stick yard, as I say. The value, it was a matter of protocol. The Mamluk chronicles very often indicated the monetary value of the diplomatic gifts when they were received. We don't know how this was done, but when a gift arrived, they always say, in most cases, a gift was sent from so-and-so, and it was valued to so-and-so. An ambassador from Ethiopia found himself one day in a very embarrassing situation when he arrived at the court of Sultan al-Ghuri in the early 16th century. He was harshly reprimanded because of the gifts he had brought were below the expected standard. They were only worth 5,000 dinars. So the registers, the old registers, were brought in front of him, showing him the value of previous gifts from Ethiopia, telling him that 200 years earlier, in 1312, the Ethiopian had sent a gift that was worth 100,000 dinars, and this year it was only 5,000. The gifts sent by the Mongols and the Akkoyunlu Turkmen were usually not highly regarded by the Memlûk chroniclers. The material value of the gifts should not be underestimated. It was important. For example, we know of the case of Sultan al-Mu'ayyad Sheikh that he ordered that all the gifts he would receive, the diplomatic gifts from Yemen, which were quite considerable, Venice and the Ottoman courts, and all other gifts to be received by him should be sold so that in order to fund the foundation of his mosque, but unfortunately we are not told who bought and what kind of market was there for these diplomatic gifts. The significance attached by the Memlûk Sultan to gift exchange is best demonstrated by the diplomatic crisis that could happen when things went wrong or expectations were not met, as for example in the case of a famous and lavish gift sent by Azahir Baybars to Berke Khan of the Golden Horde. The Memlûk embassy, loaded with many precious things, among others exotic animals described in detail in the chronicles, ended up in Constantinople on its way to Sarai, where the Emperor Michael Palaeologus VIII prevented their passage to the Black Sea in order not to displease the Mongol ruler Hulagu. The Memlûk embassy was kept for 3 years in the Byzantine capital, during which the animals died in neglect. Baybars, infuriated, summoned the Greek patriarch and bishops and asked them to excommunicate the Byzantine emperor. He then sent Greek clerics with the excommunication documents and an angry message to Constantinople. The Byzantine emperor eventually released the Memlûk ambassador. I'm not sure if it is because of the excommunication threat or perhaps for other reasons. The Memlûk weighed their own gifts not only according to the recipient's status, but also according to the actual circumstances. Some cases or special occasions required gifts more valuable than the norm. The gifts sent by Azahir Baybars to Berke Khan, which I already mentioned, were of particular significance because they celebrated the Golden Horde's conversion to Islam and their alliance with the Mamluks against the Mongols of Iran, the Ilkhanid. Among the many valuable gifts of Baybars was a Quran manuscript said to be penned by the Caliph Osman. Similarly, and as a special gift, Sultan Jakmak sent in 1440 to the Ottoman Sultan Mehmed II a Quran manuscript also said to be penned by Osman. Then this to celebrate the holy wars led by the Ottomans and the expansion of Muslim rule in Europe. This was still before fall of Constantinople. It was 1440. It is astonishing that two pious sultans like Baybars and Jakmak would allow that a Quran of Osman would leave Cairo. It is even more astonishing that Sultan al-Ghuri still had a Quran attributed to Osman in the early 16th century, on which the Mamluk used to swear allegiance to the Sultan. He apparently took it to him to the battlefield of Marjedabek, where he fought the Ottomans. There it was reported to have been lost. However, as you know, there's another Quran manuscript attributed to Osman at the Topkapi Museum, another one at the library of the Shrine of Al-Hussein in Cairo, and another one also at the library in Tashkent. So the question is, how come that so many manuscripts attributed to Osman existed, and did the Mamluk produce such manuscripts for their gifts? Another special gift was sent in 1485 by Sultan Qaitbay to the Ottoman Sultan Bayezid II. It was worth 10,000 dinars, which was more than the average value for such occasion. It was accompanied also by a letter of investiture from the Abbasid Caliph of Cairo to the Sultan. The reason for this particularly generous gesture was to appease the Ottoman Sultan, who was infuriated about an incident that had occurred shortly before. Sultan Qaitbay had namely stolen a bejeweled dagger, which was among the gifts sent from the Bahmanid court in India to Bayezid. The gifts were intercepted by the governor of Jeddah, the Mamluk governor of Jeddah, on its way to Istanbul and sent to Qaitbay. Qaitbay appropriated the dagger, and Sultan Bayezid knew or has learned about that. Ultimately, eventually, Qaitbay had to formally apologize to Bayezid and return the dagger. Ibn Iyas believed that this episode was the reason for the following war between the Ottomans and the Mamluks in Anatolia. Diplomatic correspondence between Mamluks and Ottomans is regularly documented since the reign of Bayezid I. When Bayezid also, we know that in 1393, he requested from Sultan Barkok a physician to treat his joints, and on this occasion he sent him a white falcon. Barkok sent him a high-ranking physician and medicine. The following year, Bayezid sent 10,000 dinars to Cairo to assist Barkok in his confrontation with Timur, before he himself, a couple of years later, fell in the hands of Timur. In the course of the serial conquests, the Ottomans continued to proudly send captured Christians to other Muslim courts, including the Mamluks. In 1396, after his conquest of Nicopolis from King Sigismund of Hungary, Bayezid I sent 200 prisoners from different nations, including French and Italians, to the Mamluk sultans. The Venetian merchant Pilotti, who lived in Cairo at that time, saw this man and spoke to them. He reported that they were converted to Islam and integrated in the Mamluk military establishment. They were young, handsome, and choice Mamluks, he said. Murad II sent Jakmak in 1445 prisoners of war, probably captured during the Battle of Varna, with their armors and horses. The parade in Cairo was a sensation, attracting a large crowd and described as more magnificent than the Mahmal, that is the pilgrimage procession. Mehmed II sent members of the Byzantine aristocracy as gifts to the Mamluk court. And in the second half of the 15th century, European travelers who visited Cairo saw Hungarian Mamluks and reported that they had been a gift sent from Bayezid II. The typical Ottoman gift package to the Mamluk court was, beside human beings, a selection of fur: ermine, sable, squirrel, fox, and lynx. And the Mamluks, the Mamluk had very great demand for fur in the 15th century, because it was part of the Mamluk regal, of the Mamluk costume. And this fur probably came from Russia. Silver and gold vessels. Textiles, mainly silk from Bursa, and birds of prey. So this was the general, or usually the package sent from the Ottomans to Cairo. Ottoman embassies were usually met in Cairo with great pomp, and their gifts were always praised by the historians. A special yet representative Mamluk gift was the one sent by Sultan Jakmak to Mehmed the Conqueror in 1440. Beside the Quran of Osman that I just mentioned, it included a large selection of gold and silver decorated weapons and armors, helmets, and two brigandines. I'm going to say what brigandine is with gold. A golden saddle with its brocaded textiles, made and woven with 600 miskal of gold. This must be about 400 grams, I think, of gold, and 15 other saddles, and a large selection of luxury textile made from Alexandria, from the Dar al-Tiraz, as I said, the royal manufacture. There were also 3 elephants and balsam oil. Now, I'm going to show you some of the objects that may have been sent, or the kind of objects that were sent to the Ottoman cause on several occasions. As I said, the Mamluk sent usually weapons, and they are described in the text as made of steel and decorated with gold, very unlike what we normally know about Mamluk crafts. This is one example of what could have been sent as this armor decorated with gold. This is another very fine gold. The gold was the main feature of these weapons and or armors, as we see here. And here's some details of that of this armor, which is in Vienna, entirely inscribed steel with gold and entirely inscribed all over. An axe. Also, this is very astonishing when you compare Mamluk art, decorative art of that period, with the objects we see here. It's a completely different technique, which is mainly due also to the fact that here we are working on steel and not on brass or copper. It's almost like book illumination. All these pieces are 15th century. We do not have earlier example. This is one from Vienna, and here is one from Florence on the right, and the left-hand one is from the Military Museum here. And also we know that they use chamfers or armors for the horse, which are also described in the sources as made of steel and decorated with gold. I think this one is particularly beautiful, the one we see here. And helmets, steel made of gold, and sometimes also the name of the craftsman are mentioned, like this Mamluk casket from the helmet, early 15th century in the Louvre. And two brigandines. And it's very interesting because this is in the gift package mentioned from Jakmak to Mehmed the Conqueror in to Bayezid in 1440. And this is the only example of this it's a kind of armor, although it doesn't look like this. It's a padded armor. It's made of velvet, red velvet, and gold decoration. And in the name of, this was the same Sultan Jakmak. The only example we have is this one, which is in Florence. And you can see whenever you see the red traces, these are the wool or the hair of the velvet. The red velvet is complete, and they are described as made of red velvet. Inside, they are padded with metals to give protection. So they are ceremonial costumes which at the same time give protection against attacks. And balsam oil. Balsam oil is quite surprising to have been sent. Normally, this was a Mamluk gift to a European country. The balsam oil was very precious, and was known that the best and the only one you can use is the one that comes from Egypt, and in a village near Cairo, where it was grown, believed to have grown, to grow only there, because there the Virgin Mary, during the flight to Egypt, has bathed Jesus Christ in the water of this well. And ever since, this balsam can grow only there. And it was a very, very expensive gift to be given, and it was when it was purchased, it was as much as gold. And normally the Christians used it. It was always sent to Christian countries for baptism water and for sacerdotal purpose. And I think that normally the other Muslim rulers did not receive balsam oil, but the Ottomans apparently received them. We don't know exactly why. Well, I mean, these are the kind of gifts, and even after the conquest of Constantinople, the gift package was similar to what has described there, except that there were more horses, and then there was, instead of 3 elephants, 2 elephants and 1 zebra, but also saddles, equestrian equipment, and textile. Al-Ghuri and Selim I continued to exchange gifts even after Al-Ghuri had moved to Aleppo to meet Selim on the battlefield. This was indeed one of the most ironic gift exchanges in Mamluk history. Selim was trying to make Al-Ghuri believe that his army was marching against the Safavids, not Mamluk territory, and sent him lavish gifts of 40 Mamluks, fur, velvet, wool, silk, and other presents. Al-Ghori, still hoping to avoid a military confrontation, responded with a gift of 10,000 dinar and a message offering peace. However, according to Ibn Iyas, the Mamluk envoy who brought the gifts was arrested by Selim, paraded on a mule, wearing a filthy gown and a bonnet, and carrying on his head a basket filled with the droppings of his horse. A few days later, in September 1516, Al-Ghuri was killed in the Battle of Margedabek. After the common Ottoman conquest of Egypt, the first governor instated by Selim, the Mamluk Emir Khairbak, sent his new master in Istanbul a lavish gift of 50 choice horses, a mule, a very, very valuable mule, a large quantity of silk, fabric, and garments, and sugar cooked with musk, a large variety of gems and drink, and porcelain in blue, transparent type, and many other things as usually the kings receive. Diplomatic gifts were usually a composite package, as you have seen from this description also. Some of them were imported, like exotic animals, and Chinese porcelain, which the Mamluks offered to monarchs, but which they themselves had to import. Import was not a problem. The Ottomans sent to the Mamluk court European and Persian textiles and fur from Russia. The Mamluks sent Indian textiles to the Ottomans, and they received from the Safavid silk from Bursa and Anatolian carpets, as well as Venetian gowns. Some gifts were even recycled. An interest case is a ceremonial tent that came to Sultan Al-Ghuri. It has been initially made for the Akkuyunlu Uzun Hassan, came in the possession of Shah Ismail, who offered it to the Zulqadar Ali Daulat, who then offered it to the Mamluk Sultan. The second-hand nature of the gift was not a fault, quite the opposite. It conveyed a pedigree and a historic patina to the objects. In some cases, even, it was a case of special appreciation. When the Al-Khanid ruler offered peace to Al-Nasir Muhammad, he sent him gifts with his own turban. And the Ottoman Sultan Murad sent to Basbai the clothes he was wearing himself, including also his silk turban. This custom was common in other courts as well, before the Mamluk and also in many other medieval courts. Sometimes specific gifts were requested, and like, for example, the Mamluk asking the Gornho to send beautiful Kipchak girls. Shah Rukh requested from the Mamluk Sultan to send him books. Jakmak asked for Persian books. The Ottomans were very well known for requesting gifts which sometimes annoyed the Venetians, as Julian Rabier has shows. And even a malicious request came from Sultan Selim, while the Mamluk Sultan Ghuri was already waiting for him near Aleppo for the final battle. He asked him to send him sweets, and and they were sent to him. So many features of diplomatic gift with matter of routine and court culture, which you find in all courts at almost all times, like textiles of all kinds, furnishing, garments, fabric, clothes, tents, and so on. Animals and exotic animals since the beginning of history were a diplomatic gift as elsewhere. And we also know of the panda diplomacy of the Chinese even nowadays. And precious and exotic objects described in general as tuhaf, which is also the term used, I think, in Ottoman sources. It always the word used hadaya, which means present, and tuhaf, which mean rarities. It is very important that the word tuhaf, when diplomatic correspondence always write, thank you for the tuhaf. They have really marveled. Tuhaf, a rarity. They have really fascinated us. And the word tuhaf is almost identical with diplomatic gift. And it means that it is an object, tuhaf, an object of marble, a rarity, not a usual thing. This was a very integral part of a diplomatic gifts. For example, a tuhfa would be when the Sultan of Yemen sent to Cairo a horse that had no genitals, and it urinated only from a hole in its belly. So this would be a rarity and also a tuhfa. The Mamluk received the exotic animals from Asia and Africa. And in 1403, Timur sent Sultan Farag, although he considered him as his vassal, an elephant. probably from his Indian conquest. It was carrying a wooden palanquin large enough to hold 10 musicians playing cymbals. Such elephants with cymbals have been seen at the court of Samarkand and described. And amusingly, this elephant, which is much earlier, it is 12th century Syria, it is from the Khalili collection. And it shows that this tradition of elephants with palanquins and musicians has been current all over the Muslim world. And before Timur, this is 200 years before Timur, and this is Mosul, probably 100 years before Timur, a detail of a metal basin showing an elephant with musicians like the one that came to Cairo from Timur. And on one occasion, the Indian king, we don't know which part from India, sent 2 elephants which entered Cairo with fanfares and trumpets and drums and through the whole city parading. And then they went and the citadel and they performed elephant combats there. And this is an example where there are many Indian representations of elephant combats, and this is an example of them. So beside that, there were also the human beings. And I have mentioned human beings. There were the white people, boys who became Mamluks, or white men, the slave girls who went to the harem. But there were also black slaves who came from Africa. And these people could have make very big career. This mosque here of Jawhar al-Kunuq Ba'i was built by somebody who was a eunuch, a black eunuch, sent as a gift from Ethiopia to Cairo. He made a great career in Cairo, and he built this madrasa just very near the Azhar Mosque with a stone mausoleum. We also know of another emir who became very important during the Mamluk period, and he was Arghun. Arghun was his name. He was himself a gift sent by the Chinese emperor to the Mongol ruler of Iran, who sent him as a gift to Cairo. And so he made a very important career. But not only Mamluk, not only human beings arrived alive, sometimes they also arrived dead. And these were as severed heads. I couldn't find anywhere in Islamic painting an example of severed heads, so there are plenty in Christian art of the severed head of St. John. So this is why, just in order to show something. And then one of this map, we know that Uzun Hassan, the Akulunlu ruler, has sent several heads to the Mamluk Cairo. One of them, that of the Timur Sultan Abu Sa'id, after he won a battle against him. In 1511, the Safavid envoy of Shah Ismail brought to Cairo a box with the head of Uzbek Khan, and the Ottoman Sultan Selim sent Al-Ghuri the head of Ala ad-Dawla, the ruler of the Zulqadar principality. The Zulqadar were vassals of the Mamluks, so by sending this gift, this meant you are the next. But Selim did not get hold of Ghuri's head, otherwise it would have landed in Tabriz probably, but they never found his body. There were differences between Mamluk gifts sent to Muslim courts and some to Christian courts. I have mentioned that the Ottomans, but not only they, received weapons, and sometimes also the Mamluks were sent, or Mamluk, people like themselves, as gifts. Slaves and weapons do not figure among the gifts that would be sent to Europe. And they did not receive slaves either from Europe. Textile from Alexandria and saddles, ceremonial saddles, golden saddles were sent to everyone. Spices and scents and drugs belonged to the gifts sent to Europe, of course, because of the spice trade, and it was all kinds of spices were very valued. And when we say spice, we should be very careful. It's not just spice for food. Much of it is pharmaceutical product. Almost every kind of spice of herbs that belong to the spice exchanges were used for medical purpose. The Mamluks received them from Yemen, and because Yemen played a very important role in the spice trade. Among the drugs that the Egyptians sent, where the Mamluks sent, were the Egyptian speciality, like the balsam oil I have just described, and the teriac. Teriac, which originated in Greek medicine, attributed to Galen, was an antidote used against all kinds of snake poison as well as other diseases. There was also a Venetian and an Ottoman versions of the teriac. It consisted of cooked viper snake flesh mixed with herbs and drugs and processed to pills or capsules. Evliya Çelebi, who was in Cairo, relates that after taking the teriyak from the hospital of Kalaoun in Cairo, he was cured of impotence he had been suffering for 27 years. After the conquest of Egypt, the Ottomans continued the Mamluk tradition of sending teriyak and balsam and also exotic animals. The Mamluk sent regularly Chinese porcelain to Europe. They received the porcelain from Yemen by the hundreds, and we know that the Yemeni sultans, when they had banquets, they were serving food in 500 Chinese bowls, and similar reports are also given from the Mamluk court. However, they sent to Europe, to Florence and to Venice, and on one occasion to Bayezid also, they sent them by the dozen. The maximum number of porcelain pieces that was sent to Europe was 30 pieces. And here we have, at that time, exactly just short before the end of the Mamluk period, when Bellini describes the gods feasting, he has only 4 Chinese bowls. So they were at that point still a rarity. They became available in larger number in Europe after the Portuguese then had found the way around Africa to the Far East. But elephant and giraffes were the most frequent gifts that the Mamluk used to send, or among the most Mamluk frequent gifts the Mamluk used to send abroad. And they were very, very demanded and very popular kind of gifts. The great demand for diplomatic gifts and were met by the Nubians, because Nubia had to give a tribute to Egypt, and it was fixed with so and so much animals, so and so many slaves, so and so many giraffes, and so many things, so that the Mamluk could then send them as gifts abroad. After the Ottoman conquest, some of these Mamluk gifts were expected from the Ottomans. Caterina de' Medici is reported to have requested an elephant, a giraffe, and other exotic animals, as well as Ethiopian slaves from the Ottoman Sultan. The most sensational, and perhaps one may say the star among the exotic animals, was the giraffe. Medieval Egyptians were very well aware of this impact abroad. Mamluk giraffes were sent to the Golden Horde, to Sicily, Seville, Naples, Florence, Samarkand, and Istanbul. And the one to Samarkand has been depicted in the Zafarnameh of Yazdi, which describes then how the Egyptian ambassador in envoy or the Egyptian embassy arrives at the court of Timur with this giraffe. And this was such a sight at that time that Clavijo, the Spanish ambassador who was at the same time there at the court of Timur, describes in 1.5 pages this astonishing animal. A giraffe was always a sensation when it crossed a city. We have some from all the places, from Seville, when in the 13th century Mamluk giraffe arrived, how everybody went to the street and celebrated the giraffe. But perhaps one of the most famous giraffes is the one sent from Sultan Qaitbay to Lorenzo de' Medici in Florence in 1483. And this giraffe has been in the sources. Sultan Qaitbay, in some Italian chronicles, is praised as the Sultan who has sent the giraffe to Medici. In Europe, it's usually called, and in literature, the Medici giraffe. It was a Medici that went from Qaitbay to Florence. And when the giraffe entered, it was not only a giraffe, it was a very big gift package that arrived in Florence in 1483. There was a lion, there were horses, all kind of things, and the giraffe. And when the giraffe, apparently the Egyptian ambassador or the Mamluk ambassador, was received with great honor in the loggia of the Signoria in Florence, and the giraffe was depicted by many artists, and it had quite an impact on Florentine Renaissance painting of that time. This is one of the images, and it shows It is in the Palazzo Vecchio, in the apartment of Cosimo de' Medici. It was built, it was after the giraffe had died, and in the later, 30 years, about 30 years later, and it shows Lorenzo de' Medici receiving the Memlûk embassy. And this painting is not just a painting on the ceiling, it is in the, on the wall, it is in the middle of the ceiling of the apartment. And in this end, we see Lorenzo seated, no, I didn't want to go that far. Lorenzo sitting here and receiving the giraffe, and with Middle Eastern looking people around it. There's also a lion in the front side. But it was given such significance because this picture includes two elements. One is the Mamluk giraffe, which points to the Mamluk embassy of Qaitbay. And the other one, which is in the middle of the image, shows a man wearing red and carrying a red cardinal hat, bringing it to Lorenzo de' Medici. And these were the two important events associated with Lorenzo de' Medici, that he managed, that his son becomes cardinal, and he has the good relation with the Vatican, with the Pope, and that he had relations with the Memlûk Sultan of Egypt, which is also shown here with the giraffe. So it was an important event. But ever since, many draftsmen must have depicted this giraffe, because we see it in Florentine art of that time on many examples, like, for example, this painting, which show a giraffe, probably, it's 1490s, 7 years short after the giraffe, Qaitbay's giraffe arrived in Florence, and Florence, and probably based on drawings or that were made at the same time, like this one. Piero di Cosimo is the same one who also made this painting showing the giraffe. So it had quite an impact, and we see here this Mamluk groom who brings the giraffe in, very similar to another groom who we'll see later, who brings an elephant to Milan. And the impact on Florentine art of that period can see in many, especially in the depiction of the adoration of the Magi, like this one by Domenico Ghirlandaio in Florence, Santa Maria Novella. It is just in the main apsis of the church, and it shows on the back, you see this caravan of Oriental, Middle Eastern looking people and bringing a giraffe. It is just in this place where you see the star in the very central apsis of Santa Maria Novella. And also other painters like Bernardini, who was specialized in adoration of the Magi, represents the kings of the Orient arriving with a giraffe. So the Mamluk embassies had an impact on this perception of the Magi. And the same Bernardini had another also giraffe included among the gifts or among the presents that the kings from the Orient, the Magi, bring to Jesus Christ. And even in elsewhere outside Florence, like, for example, this painting by Bellini, which shows a story that has nothing to do with embassies and so on, but you see somewhere a giraffe associated with Alexandria, with Egypt, with the Mamluks. But also we have here, we know, for example, elephants, and one of the diplomatic gifts sent to Milan, to the Duke of Milan, was an elephant. And it has been, we know from the sources, it has been depicted on the wall of the castle of Milan, the Castello Sforzesco, around the 1470s. It was short after the embassy was sent. It's not in a very good conditions, but it gives you the painting. It shows the elephant with the Mamluk groom. It was for Galeazzo Sforza. So it was a gift that arrived with it is mentioned in the chronicles, and we see it depicted in the very palace of the Duke of Milan. Animals are generally, as we see, associated with embassies and with the Orient and with the Mamluk. Here is a scene which is inspired on Sueti. It's well known. Some Marcos, but it's about Alexandria, and Alexandria is represented with Mamluk images, with a ruler who looks very much like a Mamluk sultan and so on. And yet, they are lions, so the animals are the most important part of those diplomatic gifts. And here I have used this to show you that. So to give us a general idea of the Mamluk diplomatic gift, they display a complex picture. There is a constant and universal feature which is inherited from the ancient cultures, from the old times, which is animals, textiles, rarities, and so on. These are universal and almost eternal and ongoing traditions of diplomatic gifts. But they also had included in this a very Mamluk specific, I would call emblematic of the Mamluks kind of gifts. And these were the ceremonial textiles and of the Daret Shiraz. Now, it's very unfortunate that I have to talk about things of which it's not in fact an art historical topic at all, because none of the objects I'm discussing have survived. One of the major gifts of the Mamluks were the Shiraz textile. That is textile, epigraphic textile, embroidered with inscription bearing the names of the sultan when according to hierarchy, with the coat of arms or the blason of the sultan. This is an item which is mentioned in every diplomatic gift, and we don't have a single example that I could show you, except some fragments we cannot even identify with Shiraz. And the other emblematic gifts are part of the saddles. The saddles the golden saddle was something like the Mamluk emblem, a Mamluk emblematic gift. It was sent from the 15th century or late 14th century onward everywhere. Horses with horse trappings plus saddles. And the saddles seem to have been the most important. They were particularly proud of it. They could gilded. They were sometimes studded with precious stones, with carnelians, with jade, with rock crystal, or inlaid with gold and silver, and so on. And we don't have a single saddle I know of. If you ever find one in the storage of the museums, perhaps in Istanbul, let me know. But so these were the most important and symbolic gifts for the Mamluks. So what we see is that these gifts did not survive, but they were the most important thing. And the Mamluks did not send ever as gifts. This was one of my biggest surprise while doing this research. They did not send the gifts that were exported, that we find in all museums in the world. Mamluk inlaid work, an example of the 14th century to the right and to the left of 15th century, for which they were famous. This one, which is here in Istanbul in the Islamic Museum, magnificent example of Mamluk metalwork, where they were exported, they were used in European or even depicted in European art of the Renaissance, as we see here. The fantastic Mamluk enamel glass that was unique and exported everywhere, as we see here, is not anywhere mentioned as diplomatic gifts. Even other metal works that carry European blazon or coat of arms are not mentioned. Or the Mamluk carpets, which we know very well from collections in Europe. And I think it seems to me that these gifts were meant, these objects were meant not to be sent. What you send as export is not a tuhfa anymore. It is not a rarity. It is not something to be sent as gift, because I didn't find any reference to such gifts in the Mamluk sources, whereas we know them from European inventories, as from Europe, that these were imports in large quantity. Silver, ceramic, also pottery, like this one, pottery like this. I think this kind of pottery, they sent Chinese porcelain, but they didn't send these pottery as gifts. Probably they may have sent them as package to include the spices or the other things that they were sending. However, by sending, if we look at the iconography of these Mamluk gifts, you have the tradition, the called like the ancient kings, you send animals, you send silk, you send rare things, and then you send something very typical, which is in a way like sending themselves a portrait of themselves. The Mamluks did not make portraits of themselves, and they did not make illustrated manuscripts. But by sending inscribed gowns, typical of Mamluk ceremonial culture by sending saddles, and they were themselves a military cavalry aristocracy. They were sending an image of themselves. And they also sent very often Mamluks as gifts. So they were combining in a way to show themselves as people who are aware of tradition, who follow the tradition of ancient kings by offering traditional gifts, and at the same time a way of doing, here, this is us. So it was in a way showing themselves. And in fact, we have not considered these objects as Mamluk art. It is not, it's difficult to discuss them under the art historical perspective. But for the people at that time, there was, if you look at the chronicle, there was nothing that was more impressive and amusing and interesting for them than seeing a Mamluk in apparel, wearing ceremonial costume, riding a horse on a golden saddle and with all the fine horse trappings. So this was at that time, this was what Mamluk art, and not what we today define as Mamluk art from the objects we see in the museum collections. Well, thank you for your attention.
Efendim çok teşekkür ediyorum ben de. Sormak isteyenler varsa onlara mikrofon ulaştıracağız. Buyurun Nurhan Hoca.
Doris, there is a Quran box.
What is that?
Quran box.
Quran box?
Quran.
Ah, a Quran box, yes, yes.
Yes. Is it possible that
Pardon.
that is also a diplomatic gift?
I mean,
have you considered that?
it's a, I don't know this particular box, Nora. Do you know what period it is?
I only know that it is from Memlûk. It is Memlûk Quran box. It's huge.
Ah,
Very
the long,
Yes.
the big ones. So it would be 14th century.
Yes, yes.
You see, the problem is I haven't found during my diplomatic gift anything that shows that Quran were usually sent. There were only 2 copies of the Quran of Osman.
But this is the case. It's a beautiful object. And Kemal Çi published it.
It's interesting. It could have come as it, but I don't have anything that shows that Quran were normally sent as gift, except the one of Osman, or the 2 of Osman that were sent.
Let us look at it.
Thank you. I will, of course.
Publication. I just remember now.
I mean, the problem is the material that I have. It is the Mamluk Chronicles. Sometimes there are some occasionally Ottoman Chronicles or Ottoman texts. I have not looked at Ottoman archives, and I'm not aware of that, but Mamluk Chronicles, and sometimes many gifts, this is a very interesting feature, many diplomatic letters have at the end the list of the gifts that were sent. So I sent you this and this and this, so you will assume this is a complete list. And I didn't find any books in this list, and it's always almost stereotypical. It is textiles and weapons. Weapons made of steel and wood. I didn't find books.
And this is a box.
Yes, but the box would have been, they were a Quran manuscript.
Yeah.
The box would not come alone. If the box would come, I suppose.
But it is itself very beautiful. It may have come without a Quran in it.
I mean, if it had come, I would imagine, if you are a sultan and you send the Quran box,
see it.
you would not say.
You should see it.
I will look at it, but as I said, this is, I have not a single mention that this could have been a gift. But there is still probably our information is patchy.
From Selim, perhaps.
What?
After the conquest.
Yes, of course. I mean, if we look at the porcelain of the top, surely the Battle of Selim has brought lots of Mamluk things.
Yes.
Yeah, among us, we know the porcelain,
It's also
which was in large quantities and so on. These things may have been at the citadel or in the Mamluk palaces, and it may have become like this,
Yeah.
or possibly.
It is possible,
Yeah.
yes.
May I ask the biggest value of these gifts, and can we convert it to today's money?
No.
Which?
I didn't try this. I mean, it's a very challenging question. If I go and say I found the special gifts were 10,000 dinar. In certain cases it was 20,000 dinar, which was very, very special. When the Mamluks made peace with the Mongols of Iran, they sent a gift of 20,000 dinar. Dinar is a gold dinar. Now we have to calculate. I mean, I made something like this when you calculate how much a mosque costs. So how much do you pay, do you have cost to build a mosque? Or how much is the trousers of a lady of the harem with all full of pearls would cost? So you would be surprised how the relation can be sometimes. One could only make assessment according to comparable objects. A piece of land or a piece of, or a monument, or compared to expensive gowns. But today, I don't see how.
I just asked this question to compare today's diplomatic gifts with those days.
I have no idea what do people send today as diplomatic gifts. and what do they send normally?
Planes, I don't know, maybe.
They send a lot of bazaar stuff. Yes, I have seen when sometimes you have things that came as gift, or the ambassador bring many of them. I don't know.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for an entertaining and informative talk. I have an elephant question.
Yes.
And that has to do with the image that's in Venice that shows the wedding of the future Mehmet the Conqueror that you mentioned. It was Jakmak that sent gifts to that wedding you mentioned, I think, in your talk. It's not important anyway. This image shows Sit Hatun. You know the image, I'm sure.
Yeah.
The bride of Mehmet sitting on an elephant. It's a great source of a big question in Edirne, in the just before the conquest of Constantinople. What is an elephant doing there? It also depicts Melik Arslan, who is the brother-in-law of the Sultan, and he's dressed in tiraz garments with double-headed eagles in crimson. And as we know from the descriptions of the Mamluks of the Ayyubids, they also wore these double-headed eagle crimson garments, and I'm wondering whether that's a khila, because these guys are the bride and the brother-in-law are Dulkadiroğlu. So are they dressed in Mamluk finery, and are they bringing this elephant, or is this a direct gift from the Mamluks? It is very likely
that the elephant is a Mamluk one. I mean, an elephant would have come to Istanbul, has more or less at that time must have come from via Cairo. This is, and we know that there were several gifts. Jakmak has sent, and Inal after that, after the conquest of Constantinople, has sent also two, and they were before that. And on one occasion, but there are several mentions of elephants sent to Istanbul. Regarding, I don't know the picture, I must say, and I would like very much to see it. About the double-headed eagle, I'm not sure that at this period in the early 16th century, I would be very surprised that the double eagle still exists somewhere in Mamluk art. But I have, again, this is with a caveat, because we don't know what Mamluk textile, ceremonial textile look like. I have description in text saying that it was a very hierarchical thing, that the inscriptions on the embroidered were different according to who is going to receive what, and some with the name of the Sultan, and so on, and so on, and so on. But the double-headed eagle at that time would surprise me, even perhaps.
Okay, so it's not Mamluk. In that respect, there is a Mamluk textile that was drawn by Pisanello.
Yes.
Yes, you know that one. So
but this is not a gift. I mean, I don't agree with Nicole, because we don't. Also, they depict weapons and say they may have been sent to the emperor. I don't know of any weapon sent to European rulers or Christian rulers. So this is a painting, but we don't know it's a gift. If we really keep very careful and look what is a gift, we have very little evidence regarding physical examples. Very little. This is my biggest problem.
Doris,
Yes.
is there any gift sent as a Kaaba cover? Kaaba cover piece?
Yeah, I know. The Kaaba cover, I have a case where the Mamluk sent to the ruler of Morocco a gown made with a piece of the Kaaba, after it was dismantled. So they used to give him to mix gown and send them as gift. I have, it's 1 or 2 cases that this was sent to either to the Marinid ruler of Morocco or the Hafsid of Tunis. He had sent
Not to Ottomans.
No, I didn't find any.
Sumio found one piece, Memlûk piece of Kaaba cover in Bursa. So she has to.
Yes, I mean this could have been kind of that any high dignitaries usually after when you pull it down, usually the Kaaba cover is then distributed to high dignitary persons. It doesn't have to be a diplomatic gift from ruler to ruler. But of course it is possible.
If you found
Okay.
anyone in one of the lists.
Well, this is a nice thing about such a gathering, that I learn so much from the questions and from the also information. So, yes, I will look, and there are many, many questions unanswered. And I found many things that obliged me to make conclusions that I was not planning and I was not expecting.
You can come to Istanbul.
Yes.
And stay longer.
Yes. Any other question?
Efendim başka soru yoksa, çünkü uzak bir yere davetliler, şimdi kendileri buradan Moda'ya gidecekler. Profesör Ethem Eldem'in davetlisi olarak, dolayısıyla sorularımızı burada bırakmak istiyorum ben, çünkü İstanbul'da yağmur altında buradan Moda'ya gitmek malum bir kahramanlık. Thank you once more.
Thank you for that. Si tu peux tout simplement tenir ce... Tabii.